I'm the Spaceman. It's a view from space on AM 640 Talk Radio. This is the final segment of tonight's show. Did you know, I had it on earlier, but it's quite thought-provoking. The distance between the centre of London, England, the very centre of London, England, nautical miles now, draw a line from the centre of London directly to Mount Hermon in Jerusalem, Israel. It's precisely 1,948 nautical miles. 1948. Mount Hermon is supposedly the location of the first descent of angelic forces to Mount Hermon. It's no coincidence that Israel was formed by the UN in the year 1948. It's also true that Freemasonry is practiced in Solomon's Temple as the ancient mystery religion of Egypt and Babylon with its heathen gods and rituals. King Solomon created a lodge, as a matter of fact, in the first temple, which was attended by 70 men in the house of Israel. 7, of course, the number of spirituality. Ezekiel, the prophet, also describes an inner chamber in the temple where these elders worshipped every form of creeping things and abominable beasts and all the idols of Israel. These rituals will be reestablished in the Temple of Solomon, which will be rebuilt by a modern Knight Templar who will be the Antichrist. In 1099, the original Knights Templar established their Jerusalem headquarters in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. According to the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Knights Templar and monks who occupied the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, also installed by Godfrey de Bouillon, were formed into an official and duly constituted order, the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. 2 centuries later, by 1291, the Western Crusaders were thrust out of the Holy Land by the Saracens, and the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was lost to the Roman Empire. The Templars, who adopted the esoteric Kabbalism in the Middle East and brought it to Europe, had a falling out with the Roman Empire. And in 1309, Pope Clement V, I told this story last week, and King Philip IV of France supposedly dissolved the Knights Templar Order. The Grand Master Jacques de Molay, executed in 1314 by the Roman Catholic Church, and the Knights of the Order of the Temple were also either executed or fled to Europe for safety. In Scotland, a place where the Templars found safety, Robert the Bruce made a vow to go to Jerusalem and reclaim the city from the Saracens, but in 1329 Robert the Bruce was killed. Before his death, he had expressed his wish that his heart be removed, placed in a casket, taken to Jerusalem, and buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the original Templar headquarters. Robert the Bruce's heart never reached Jerusalem and was returned to Scotland, where it was buried at Melrose Abbey. The Templars kept his dream alive, which was to reclaim the Holy Land, and it's very conceivable, by the way, that the heart of Alistair Sinclair was really a substitute, Robert the Bruce's. You see, burial in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre would have symbolized the claim of the Sinclairs as the head of the Merovingian Sorcerer King dynasty at that time, to be the rightful heirs of the throne of Jerusalem, the King of Jerusalem. Yes, lies are planted all throughout history to make this great deception appear as real and true. In fact, in Traitors and Carpetbaggers in the Promised Land, a book by Barry Seamus, even includes a chapter on the Masonic control of Jerusalem. Masons busted in Tel Aviv mentions the real reason for the Masonic presence. The Masons covet the Temple Mount, the site of Solomon's Temple, because their mythology has the organization being established by one Hiram Abif, the master mason who supposedly built the temple 3,000 years ago. The author mentions the legend of the Hiram Abiff, which is a Masonic version of the Egyptian legend of Isis and Osiris, which has the theme of the initiation ceremony of a master mason, dramatizes the death of the ancient pagan gods and their mystery religion due to the spread of Christianity, and also of their future resurrection. The author also mentioned that Alistair Sinclair's death seemed to be in some way connected with Britain's early and deep interest in Zionism, their reverence for Chaim Weizmann, the Balfour Declaration, the British Israel Society, the Round Table policies of Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner. Today, the British Freemasons plan to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem in order to reinstitute the Old Testament sacrificial system. Their feigned patronage will deceive the Jews for a time, but their ultimate goal is really to reestablish the ancient Egyptian mystery religion as the only religion in the world, the religion of the Antichrist, the one I talk about all the time. As a matter of fact, the Garden Tomb in Israel, or Jerusalem, has Masonic connections, and the land adjacent to the compound where Jesus Christ was supposedly crucified was sold by them to the Muslims, and is now the site of an Arab bus station and mosque. This happened a few years ago, after, get this, an amateur archaeologist supposedly discovered several key things to Christ's crucifixion and key items from Solomon's temple underground in the area of the crucifixion known as Golgotha. It turns out the archaeologist, Charles Gordon, was a master Freemason and died in Khartoum, where he was murdered. The research I saw not only referred to his death, it said he was a Mason and a reputed pedophile as well. This is the same Charles Gordon who paved the way for the British through the Garden Tomb Association to purchase what is now the Garden Tomb and the adjacent lands known as Golgotha. The Garden Tomb Guidebook, 1994 edition, states Gordon was murdered in Khartoum. In order for this to occur, they would have needed to help of the Masonic entity or organization called the Palestine Exploration Fund. Albert Mackey's encyclopedia states this was formed and funded by British Freemasons to discover and take control of some historic sites in Israel. The British monarchy and its prime ministers of foreign office fabricated British Israelism in the 19th century from early versions of the story. They claimed that Queen Victoria was descended from the biblical King David and was so a descendant of the Davidic family tree that produced Jesus. They taught that the tribes of Israel wandered into northern Europe, that by this supposed genealogy, the British are the real chosen people, and the British Empire is thus God's empire. The modern Jews, by this British account, are not the historical Hebrews of the Old Testament Israel, but are in fact believe the British are. But says the British Israeli myth, in a leap of logic, the Jews need to be put into Palestine to fulfill prophecy, get slaughtered in a war with the Muslims, and bring about the end times. To provide fuel for this mythology, the royal family asked the British Grand Lodge of Masonry to establish the Palestinian Exploration Fund. In the 1870s, they dispatched soldier archaeologists to the Holy Land to dig up supposed religious relics that might impress the cheap fantasies of the beggarly masses. So says Anton Chaikin, an author, historian, and political activist with the LaRouche movement. Interestingly enough, Charles Gordon, the archaeologist, was discovering these things, and in Jerusalem, at the very same time, Robert Morris from Kentucky, founder of the Eastern Star Organization, by the way, Freemasonry for Women, was reintroducing Freemasonry to Israel. They even started holding ritual ceremonies in Zedekiah's cave, which is in close proximity to the Garden Tomb. Today, the Masons meet in that cave, and the largest chamber is known as Freemasons' Hall. You can actually see the coal and soot, etched symbols, arcane messages, and names going back to 1881 when Morris and the rest of them started their activities there. It was Robert Morris who founded Eastern Star and is credited with officially reintroducing Masonry to Israel in 1872. He started meeting in those Zedekiah's caves around this time and performed some type of very important ritual there, his reintroduction of Freemasonry. Morris wrote about this ceremony and even published a copy of the map leading to the chamber of Zedekiah's cave. Charles Gordon would have been there in Jerusalem at this exact time as well. They would have been in the same cave system running up to the Garden Tomb in Calvary. It's all within 100 to 200 yards of the Zedekiah cave system. According to Albert Mackey, in his encyclopedia, King Solomon discovered Enoch's deposit. On this hallowed spot was Christ the Redeemer slain and buried. This is the very spot, the Garden Tomb, the same with the adjacent Golgotha. Quite a few researchers believe that that was the site of Christ's crucifixion, and many people who years ago excavated under that site say they found convincing proof. It's always been denied now by the Garden Tomb landowners that they sold Golgotha to the Arabs. That very spot now has a mosque, as I said, and a bus station sitting on top of this Christian site. If this is all indeed true, they sold the pagans one of the most key sites in all of Christianity. This has been a View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm